Jen and I had a client a long time ago now, actually. He was kind of a young teenage girl, and she had brain cancer, basically. So her parents had tried everything, and obviously the medical profession had tried everything, and she was terminally ill. So obviously it was a kind of a timeline as to how long that was going to be before she died and passed. And as part of that experience, she was obviously looking for different people to try and help in different ways. And at the time, we had an old shed, very small shed at the bottom of the garden that I used to work from. So I had a healing couch up there, and Chen and I used to perform psychic surgery basically from that shed. So this particular lady's mum booked an appointment, and they turned up. At the time, she wasn't too bad. I mean, she was diagnosed as terminally ill, but she kind of walked in. I mean, you wouldn't have particularly known there was that much wrong with her to start with, really, certainly on our first meeting. And she hopped up on the couch. I had a quick chat with her, and her mum got to understand that she'd been diagnosed with brain cancer and was obviously terminally ill, and they didn't know how long that was going to be. And of course, she was very frightened. So she was a teenage girl, very, very frightened that she was going to come to the end of her life, probably quite soon. So Chen came in, basically, and they came back for a few appointments, and he would talk to her about the process. And it was pretty obvious from his perspective that, obviously we could perform psychic surgery on her, kind of healing, really. But, Chen kind of said to her straight off the bat that he wasn't able to resolve the problem. So her time had come. And it was quite a short time because she was only teenage years. So her time had come, and she was going to pass with this particular brain cancer. But, what we started to do, obviously, we developed quite a kind of connection to her and her mum, obviously. So she was coming every few weeks. We didn't obviously charge for it at all. So it was kind of free from that perspective, because obviously we wanted to kind of help her go through this process. So what we did kind of realize at some point, as she started to get worse, she started to struggle with her hearing and her speech. And then I think she was on steroids and obviously quite a lot of pretty hardcore medication. And her face kind of swelled up, and, she started to turn up and she'd stumble in. And then that kind of moved to a wheelchair. So they'd bring her in a wheelchair and kind of bring her into the room. And what started to happen was quite unique, really, from my perspective, because I certainly hadn't been through that process with anyone before that come to me for kind of psychic surgery. Was Chen started to talk to her about the dying process. So, you are going to die. This is the end for you. And this is how it's kind of going to look. And more importantly, how it's going to feel, because, of course, she was petrified that she'd die in excruciating pain, that kind of thing. So Chen was performing psychic surgery on her to help to kind of relieve the pain, do some pain management at the same time. But again, what he was actually doing was kind of proving to her that there was kind of proof of life after death, I guess, if we sort of frame it that way. So he's a spiritual entity in my body. He's working on her and talking to her. He was then talking to her about, some ancestors of hers that had passed that were kind of in the room. And I could feel the room change its vibration. Certainly became quite cold. Anyone that kind of knows much about spiritual stuff tend to find that if spirit enter the space that you're in physically, the room goes cold. And sometimes it feels like you have like a freezer door open if you've got a spirit stood next to you, or an entity actually from that perspective. Generally there's this cold feeling, really cold, like a freezer door's open type feeling. So when Amy used to come, the room would go quite cold, and obviously we would sort of notice that there were quite a lot of spirits about in that space effectively. So Chen started to take her through, your family's here, they're going to be kind of with you on the other side after you die and pass. So, but this is the process that you need to go through. And it got to the point that she couldn't really hear from a physical perspective. So when she would turn up, the cancer progressed to the point that she was struggling to hear. She could make signs. Excuse me, she could use her hands. So her mum used to say she knows what's happening, even though she can't speak. So, and of course, Chen would be talking to her with telepathy. So he'd be speaking verbally, but she could literally hear from a telepathic perspective the conversation they were kind of going through. And, one thing kind of led to another. And then we kind of realized this last time she came, this was going to be the last time. She was, she was only weeks away from dying, and she was kind of moved into a kind of high dependency unit, where she was going to be taken through that kind of like last process, really. And then this kind of odd thing happened. So I'm talking to Chen about it and said, well, there's nothing else we can do. And he said, well, we can create this was back in the days of CDs. Some of you might remember CDs. So Chen said, we can create a CD basically, and I'll talk her through dying. So when she's actually ready to die, and she knows when that will be, basically we give this CD to her mum, and her mum plays it on a CD player in the room that she's in hospital. And basically that will teach her or let her kind of disconnect her spiritual self from her physical self, and she will die effectively. And Chen said at the time, as part of that conversation, he would be the first one that would wait for her on the other side. The moment that she leaves her body, he effectively was kind of going to come to collect her, really. So again, this was all kind of a bit risque, really, from our perspective. So I thought, okay, so went upstairs one day and just basically sat with a kind of microphone. Chen came in and he basically recorded himself taking this young girl through the last process of dying. So the last things that she needed to do before effectively the spiritual body disconnected from the physical, and she'd be pronounced, clinically dead. And then obviously that kind of spirit would move on. So we kind of made this CD basically and gave it to her mum and said, Chen's made this CD. I didn't even know what was on it. I never replayed it. In fact, Jane said the other day, have we still got the recording? And I said, I don't know. I need to go back through all my kind of archives, really, of things that we've done. But we made this recording that we never listened to because it was a private recording by Chen for this particular girl that was about to die. So that's what happened. So we had a phone call probably a week or two later, I guess, from the hospice, and her mum rang to say that Amy had passed, basically. And she said the CD was played. She actually asked, play me the CD. And literally when that CD was played, that was literally the moment as that CD finished that, obviously she kind of died and passed and moved on. So to this day, I don't actually know what was on the CD or how Chen advised her to do that and how she was going to pass.